Well, look at this beautiful swirl of chocolatey tahini goodness. We are making tahini brownies, and it might be something really different for you to try, so let's give it a go. All right, I'm gonna set this aside. Hi, I'm Judy Matuski. I'm a registered dietitian and culinary nutritionist with Athens Nutrition, and it's good to be back here every Thursday at 12 o'clock. We are doing another pretty easy, simple recipe. It is tahini brownies. This is from Milk Street Magazine. I fell in love with this one when I first saw it. I'm not really a big brownie eater. I mean, I do like chocolate, but it's not really my main go-to. So brownies sometimes can be just so chocolatey for me. So I like this version because we're swirling in peanut butter to help, for me, cut a little bit of that chocolatey flavor. So if, did I say peanut butter? We're swirling in tahini, which is a sesame butter. So if you're not familiar with tahini, this is the jar I have, not particularly for this brand, but tahini is basically just sesame butter or a sesame paste. It's something widely used in Middle Eastern cuisines. You're probably most familiar with tahini that's been used with, in hummus. That's certainly the base of making hummus. We actually had two dogs. My older dog, who recently passed, Tahini, was her name, as well as our younger dog is Sesame. So we're really in that food camp when we name our dogs. So tahini is basically, like I said, it is a sesame butter. Now it does have a slight bitterness. It's not, I think it's a pleasant bitterness. It's not overpowering, but it's there. And you do notice it, I think, if you've never had something like tahini. So anyway, keeping that in mind, it shouldn't be overly bitter. If it is overly bitter, then it's the likelihood that maybe the tahini that you have is just a little bit too old. And when you're looking for tahini, there's many different brands out there. I have a Middle Eastern market that I go to, and that's where I pick up my tahini. But when you read the ingredient list, it should just have one ingredient, which this is 100% ground whole sesame seeds. And you really want the sesame seeds to be whole. That's what helps to bring the bitterness down. Like that, if they were not, they would be a lot more bitter. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I have, and I'll just walk you through the ingredients, really super, super, super easy. I have 4 tablespoons of butter that I've already melted on the stove, just in this little saucepan. What I like about this recipe as well is that we're cutting down on the amount of butter. So brownies can be pretty rich, and a lot of that richness comes from, the chocolate and the butter. So this recipe, it's substituting the tahini for the fat in the tahini for some of the fat in the butter. So instead of using a full stick of butter, we're using only half of a stick, which helps bring that saturated fat level down in something like a dessert like this. And when we're substituting tahini for the butter, we're replacing the fat with some really good heart healthy fat. And that's what we're looking for. So this is like a monounsaturated fat or a monopolyunsaturated fat instead of that saturated fat that's coming really from the butter. So I do like that. So I melted the half of a stick. Then we're using, I think it's 4 ounces. Yeah, 4 ounces of bittersweet chocolate. I have just a Ghirardelli bar. It's, bittersweet chocolate is usually, I think, around 60% cocoa solids that are added. So this is 60% bittersweet. I just chopped it up, and you do want to chop it up, in fairly smaller pieces, because we're going to turn the heat off now of the butter, and we're just going to let this melt in the butter, but not on heat, because you don't want to overheat chocolate, because it can tend to seize on you, and it's not very pleasant. You can't really use it. So I'm going to add this in, and I'm just going to let this, it's already melting. You can kind of see it's going to melt really quickly, just from the heat from the butter. So let's just let that go. And now, to increase the chocolatiness of the brownie, we're going to add cocoa powder too. So it's about 3 tablespoons of cocoa powder with the dark chocolate, which is kind of nice. So you get the chocolate from the bittersweet chocolate, as well as from the cocoa powder. And again, from just like a health standpoint, I know we're talking about a dessert. It's not that this is particularly healthy, but it's healthier, which is okay, right? As long as it tastes great too. The cocoa powder just, adds that chocolatey richness without additional fat, which is kind of nice as well. So we're not using full chocolate here. All right, so we're going to add 3 tablespoons of cocoa powder. Whatever you have in your pantry is fine. All right, so that's gonna go in, and then we're just gonna stir this around so you can see it's just, we're just gonna stir it just so that we want that chocolate to melt, and we kind of just wanna smooth this out. If you need to use a whisk, go ahead. It didn't feel like I really needed one. It's really just kind of melts and smooths out on its own. So I'm gonna let that sit just a little bit because it's just in the heat, the chocolate will continue to melt. All right, so the recipe calls for an 8 by 8 inch square pan, and I just realized that all my cake pans are 9 by 9. So so this is my smallest one I could find, and they recommend lining it with 2 strips of foil that you would spray just if you want to lift it out of the pan easier. Honestly, I did this. I feel like this is kind of a fussy step to me. I would just spray my pan and pour my brownies in and then just serve the brownies out of the pan. I don't typically take my the whole brownie square out of the pan to serve it. So I did this, but as I was doing it, I thought this is just an extra step that I don't think is really that necessary. So the one I made, I had one 8 by 8, and then I just used a little bit of a smaller round cake pan to make the one so I can show you the finished product. All right, so in this bowl, now while this chocolate's pretty well melted, in this bowl I have about a little over a cup of sugar, just regular white sugar. And then to that, we're gonna add 3 eggs. So we're just gonna be blending just all of this together. So we have 3 eggs. Oops. And a little bit of salt. Now with tahini, because tahini is a little it has that slight bitterness. With the tahini, we are going to, we definitely need the sugar. So it does need a cup of sugar because it helps, again, with that little bitterness from we have the bitterness from the chocolate and the bitterness from the tahini, which actually the flavor combination of tahini and chocolate is just a beautiful thing. It really goes well together. But sugar helps to kind of cut that, obviously, but so does salt. So this calls for a teaspoon of salt. And a lot of times when I'm baking, I'll often cut back on salt because I don't think it's always necessary to do the full amount. This one, no, you're going to want it because it does help. Again, it helps with kind of mellowing out that little bit of that bitterness from the tahini. So we have the eggs, we have the sugar, and we have the salt. Now I'm just going to do a full tablespoon of vanilla. So it's a little more. And again, vanilla brings out the chocolatiness of chocolate. So we definitely want this in here. And instead of a teaspoon, we're using a full tablespoon. That's really going to enhance that flavor even more. Okay, so now just with the whisk, I'm just going to blend this together. So you do not need an electric mixer. You just can do this with just a whisk. And we're just kind of bringing it together, about a minute, just stir it together just to make sure that sugar starts to melt a little bit, or dissolve, not melt, but dissolve, and kind of comes together with the eggs. So give this a little whisk. And if you're ever using, tahini, you buy, this is a big jar, and it's down to the bottom. When you buy the tahini, this is one way to use it, but use it if you're not used to it. Oh my gosh, it's great in salad dressings. It's great in sauces. I toss it with pasta to make pasta salad. It works in brownies. You can make cookies with it. There's so many different ways to use tahini, and obviously in hummus, or any kind of dip, it works well. So use it up, play around with it. Find some recipes to use it so it just doesn't sit. I keep it in my refrigerator. And like natural peanut butter, this is going to separate. So the oil is going to rise to the top, solids are going to be at the bottom. So you do really need to stir it, or it's just going to be really oily at the top. I do what I do with my natural peanut butter is I turn it on its lid. So it lives in my refrigerator like this. And so then the oil just kind of works its way back up through the solids and just makes it a little bit easier. The nice thing about sesame paste, tahini, is that it's thinner than natural peanut butter. So it's much easier to mix. You know how hard it is sometimes to mix that natural peanut butter, but this isn't quite as thick, so it's good. All right. So this is all together. All right, now we're gonna add the tahini, and I already measured out 3/4 of a cup of tahini. So it's already here, and I'm gonna just add that in. It's like really this interesting kind of, it's like the exact same color as the shirt I'm wearing. All right, let's put that in. All right. Good. All right, let's put this off to into the sink. All right, so we're just gonna swirl that in a little bit. And then we're gonna add, it only calls for a third of a cup of flour. So there's very little flour in this. Now this one, the one that I made, that's round one I made, I'm gonna give it to a friend of my daughter's who has celiac, so she needs to follow gluten-free. So I used a gluten-free flour blend when I made that one. And so, but for this one, I'm just regular all-purpose flour. No need at this point, I'm just gonna now, no, I'll just keep it. No need to really use whole wheat flour. There's so little of it added. You could, I use I guess a white whole wheat, but just regular all-purpose is fine. So that's going in. And now I'm just gonna blend this together. And to get the swirl on the top, we're gonna take out 1/2 cup of this tahini mixture before we add the chocolate. So let me we're just incorporating the flour. Again, you don't want to over mix it. We're just trying to get the flour in there. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to get rid of this now because I'm going to just use the spatula for the rest of it. All right, so let's take out 1/2 cup. So I have my 1/2 cup here. So we can use this for the top to give it that nice little swirl. All right, I'm gonna set this over here. And now the chocolate that is melted and it's pretty smooth. I guess it could be a teeny bit smoother. There's a few little chocolate. Oh no, now they're kind of breaking down. Okay, so give this a little swirl. All right, so we're adding that in. Remember, this was that 1/2 stick of butter that was melted, then took it off heat, and we added the 4 ounces of chopped bittersweet chocolate, in addition to 3 tablespoons of cocoa. All right, let me just try to get it all out of here. All right, now these brownies too, when you're baking them, I think the recipe, I have to look at the original recipe. The recipe says to bake them for 28 to 32 minutes. So it's very specific. But again, it depends on the size of your pan, because this pan was a little bit bigger, so I think they cooked in less. They were more closer to 22 minutes. I just kept checking them. Basically, what you're trying to do is get the, you're just trying to see that, that they're kind of starting to set around the edge, and you can see that they're really coming together, and that when you touch them, you can tell that they've been cooked in the middle, but they're not overcooked. You don't want to undercook these particular brownies, underbake them, because it is a relatively wetter, pretty moist batter, and it'll be maybe just a little bit too kind of wet if you underbake them. But to tell you the truth, I kind of like my brownies that way. I feel like they, a little bit fudgier, rather than, I definitely not a dry brownie. All right, so here we go. We have it all together. Now we're going to take the pan that we prepared. Like I said, I don't think I would worry about the foil the next time I would do this. I'll just pour it right into a sprayed pan, or if you butter your pan, whatever you prefer. All right, so we're going to get the chocolate in. Remember, the oven's set at 350 for this recipe. And you just kind of keep an eye on it as far as checking it when you think it might be getting ready to be done. All right. So try to get as much as we can out of the bowl. All right, so I'm gonna put this aside. And then just even it out just a little bit. And then we're gonna dollop. All right, now we're gonna just take the 1/2 cup of tahini mixture that we set aside, and now we're just going to dollop the top of this. There's no any special way you need to do it. We're just putting it across the top so that we can swirl it in to give it that really pretty swirled effect. All right, so just kind of space it out, just kind of make it somewhat even. I really do love tahini. When I first tried it, I almost wasn't sure because I just couldn't, I thought, it's kind of bitter, But then when you start using it, like if you've ever had halva, that's again a Middle Eastern kind of confection, kind of candy type thing. Usually it's, often pistachios are studded in it, or they'll add cocoa to it to make it chocolate, or swirl it and marble it with cocoa. I absolutely love that. It's the combination of tahini with some sugar, maybe vanilla, and then, with some of these additional add-ins. I love that candy. I just think it's so good. And, relatively healthy because it's mostly from tahini, from, sesame paste, sesame seed. I also love tahini, sometimes sweet. I'll add just maple syrup to the tahini and just have it like that, and sometimes maybe mix it into yogurt. I love it like that. It's adding some maple syrup to it just again helps to offset that bitterness a little bit, and it just tastes such a nice flavor. All right, so now you're just gonna take the tip of a knife, and we're just gonna, I don't know, any way you want. I'm not like the most artistic, so you just kind of swirl it through, and we're just creating that swirl. You can come up with any pattern you want. All right. My cousin Deborah, who might be watching, she'd probably be beautiful at doing this. She's a fantastic artist. So anyway, so here we go. We have the swirl. This is going to go in the oven. All right, and then it'll be in there for, I'm going to set my timer to, I'm going to check it in about 22 minutes just to keep an eye on it, because this pan was an 8x8, so it is probably going to be closer to the time the recipe says. So here's the finished one I made yesterday. So, and the thing with this brownie is that the longer it sits, like when it first came out, the tahini was a little lighter in color on the top of the brownie. But as it sits, it starts to get a little bit darker, and the tahini flavor just gets a little richer, which is great. The longer it sits. So I haven't cut this yet, so I thought I would cut it with you. And let's take a peek. So because it's round and not square like a typical brownie, I'm gonna just cut it like almost like a pie. So I'll just take a little sliver out, and then just so we can take a peek at it. So look how fudgy and rich it is. It's a really very moist brownie, which makes it really nice. So fudgy and rich with the addition of tahini, which is a healthy substitute for using all that butter. We were able to cut back on the butter, use the tahini is to add, a healthier fat profile to the brownie, and that tahini and the chocolate just go so well together. All right, well, thanks for joining. I hope you like this. Give it a try. Again, this is this is really a recipe from Milk Street Magazine. I could say that again, because a lot of times I modify recipes and they kind of sort of become my own. And this one, really, I followed it pretty much to the exact recipe because I thought there was no reason to modify it. So anyway, give it a try. If you do, please let me know. And I'm pretty sure I'm back next Thursday, and I will see you again. I think I'm actually doing another tahini recipe. It's going to be tahini granola. So good, and so few ingredients, and so easy. I think you'll love it. All right, see you soon. Bye-bye.